Breaking news! The conversation around the Eagles' offense quietly shifted when reports made it clear that Jeff Stoutland is expected to return in 2026, but in a reduced role. And for Eagles fans, that detail matters a lot more than it might sound at first. Because what happened behind the scenes with the run game in 2025 explains a big part of why this offense never fully found its rhythm, and why the next offensive coordinator is walking into a situation that's already changing before they even arrive. There was no hiding the fact that the Eagles' run game struggled last season. It never had the same identity, consistency, or physical dominance that fans in Philadelphia are used to seeing. According to reporting, Jeff Stoutland was stripped of his run game coordinator role at some point during the year. That's important, because Stoutland wasn't just another assistant. He's been the run game coordinator since 2018, earning that responsibility after the Super Bowl run. And over the years, he built a reputation as one of the best offensive line coaches in the entire league. The Eagles' ground attack has always carried his fingerprints. The expectation now is that Stoutland comes back to Philadelphia strictly as the offensive line coach, without holding another title in 2026. At the same time, most of the offensive assistants don't even know yet if they're returning, because everything depends on who the Eagles hire as offensive coordinator and how many changes that new OC wants to make. That creates a strange kind of off-season tension. Staff members are waiting, roles are shifting, and the structure of the offense is being quietly rebuilt before fans even hear the final announcement. Even with the run game issues, it's hard to argue against what Stoutland has meant to this team. He's been widely praised for years as one of the best at developing offensive linemen. And even in a season where the run game didn't look right, he was still a major reason why Saquon Barkley was able to dominate in 2025. That part can't be ignored. When the Eagles had success on the ground, it usually came from technique, leverage, and physical play up front, which is exactly what Stoutland is known for. What makes the reduced role surprising is the context of the struggles. The offensive problems weren't just about scheme, they were about survival. Lane Johnson missed nearly half the season. Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens were basically playing through injuries all year. That's not a small thing. When your right tackle is gone for large stretches and your interior linemen are hurt, the run game naturally becomes inconsistent. Timing breaks down. Push disappears. Even the best coordinator in football can't fully fix that with backups and injured starters trying to hold things together. So when people hear that Stoutland's role was reduced, it raises questions. Was it truly about performance, or was it part of a bigger organizational reset tied to the offensive coordinator search? Because the offensive struggles last season were vast. It wasn't only the line, it wasn't only the backs, it was the entire operation failing to stay connected week to week. Yet Stoutland ends up being one of the few whose responsibilities change in a meaningful way. Still, the important part for Eagles fans is this. The team is better with Jeff Stoutland in the building. That much is clear. Losing him entirely would hurt far more than redefining his role. If he's comfortable stepping back and focusing strictly on the offensive line, then the Eagles at least keep one of the strongest developmental voices in the organization. The trenches are still his world, and that's where this team has traditionally built its identity. What's interesting now is how this affects the search for the next offensive coordinator. Any candidate coming in has to understand that the run game structure is already being adjusted. The Eagles might even be looking for a new run game coordinator, depending on how the staff gets reshaped. That changes what kind of offense Philadelphia can realistically build in 2026. Are they leaning toward a coordinator who brings his own system, someone who wants control of the ground game, or someone who trusts Stoutland to dominate the technical side while they focus on the big picture? Reports around the team suggest Stoutland is expected back, and that alone gives some stability to a unit that looked shaky at times last year. Even in chaos, the offensive line room remains anchored by someone players respect and trust. And in Philadelphia, that matters, because everything starts up front. If the line stabilizes, the run game has a chance to recover its identity, no matter who calls the plays.
So now the Eagles sit in an interesting spot. The run game struggled. The coordinator role shifted. The offensive staff is waiting. And Jeff Stoutland, one of the most respected figures in the building, is preparing for a season that looks different from the ones he's had since 2018. It's not about whether he's valuable. It's about how the Eagles choose to use that value as they reshape the offense for 2026. From your perspective as a fan, do you think reducing Jeff Stoutland's role helps fix the run game, or does it risk weakening one of the most important parts of the Eagles' identity? What really makes this situation fascinating is how much of the Eagles' offensive future now depends on alignment rather than talent. The personnel up front still matters, but structure, responsibility, and vision matter just as much. By keeping Jeff Stoutland as the offensive line coach while removing the run game coordinator title, the Eagles are sending a quiet message. The trench work stays elite, but the philosophy of the run game itself is open for redesign. That's a big shift for a franchise that has leaned on physical football for years. Since 2018, when Stoutland earned the coordinator role after the Super Bowl run, the Eagles' rushing identity was built from the line outward. Everything started with leverage, footwork, combo blocks, and timing. The backs benefited because the system trusted the line to dictate terms. When that system started to crack in 2025, the response wasn't just about fixing injuries, it was about questioning the entire flow of the offense. And the timing of this matters. Most of the offensive assistants are still in limbo, waiting to see who becomes the next offensive coordinator and how aggressive that person will be in reshaping the staff. That means the Eagles aren't just hiring a play caller, they're hiring a decision maker who will define how much control Stoutland keeps over the ground attack versus how much gets centralized under the new OC. In other words, whoever takes that job won't be inheriting a finished offense, they'll be inheriting one in transition. From a player development standpoint, Stoutland staying is huge. Even in a difficult season, the Eagles didn't lose their technical foundation. The issues weren't about knowing how to block. They were about continuity, health, and rhythm. Lane Johnson missing nearly half the season disrupted protection schemes and edge leverage. Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens playing through injuries hurt interior consistency. When that happens, the run game stops flowing and starts surviving. You're no longer attacking defenses, you're reacting to them. That's where Barkley's 2025 season becomes important context. Even with everything around him unstable, Stoutland's influence still showed up. When the Eagles ran well, it came from discipline up front, not trickery. That tells you the problem wasn't coaching quality, it was structure and availability. So instead of removing Stoutland from the building, the Eagles are narrowing his focus. Less title, more hands-on work with the linemen who define the offense snap by snap. Now zoom out to the bigger picture. The Eagles are clearly trying to avoid repeating the same offensive stagnation they experienced last year. Reducing Stoutland's role as a coordinator opens space for a new voice to redefine how the run game connects with the passing game. In modern offenses, the best systems don't separate those two worlds. They marry them. If the Eagles believe last season lacked cohesion, then restructuring responsibilities becomes a logical move rather than a punishment. Still, there's a risk here. Identity in Philadelphia has always been built through the line. Fans don't just want yards, they want dominance. They want defenses worn down. They want the feeling that the Eagles control the game physically. If the new offensive coordinator leans too far away from that mentality, Stoutland's reduced influence could be felt beyond just the meeting room. It could change how this team looks on Sundays. That's why this offseason is less about names and more about direction. Stoutland returning provides stability. His reduced role creates flexibility. And the open offensive coordinator position creates opportunity. All three combine into one central question. What do the Eagles want their offense to feel like in 2026? Faster, smarter, more explosive, or brutally consistent like the teams that once defined this franchise? What we do know is that the Eagles didn't choose chaos. They chose recalibration. They kept one of their most respected coaches, acknowledged the run game struggled, and made room for change without burning down the foundation. That's usually how smart organizations evolve instead of panic. Now it's on the front office and the next offensive coordinator to use that structure correctly. If they blend Stoutland's trench mastery with a modern, connected run-pass system, the Eagles can restore the identity that slipped in 2025. If they mismanage it, the offense risks becoming talented but directionless. And that's where you come in. This is the moment fans should be paying attention, not just to who gets hired, but to how the Eagles choose to build around Jeff Stoutland going forward. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the Eagles are setting up the right balance by keeping Stoutland but redefining his role, or should he still be the central voice of the run game in Philadelphia? Another layer to this story that fans shouldn't overlook is how much power shifts when a run game coordinator role changes hands. For years, Jeff Stoutland wasn't just teaching technique, he was helping define the weekly identity of the offense. That means deciding what concepts the Eagles leaned on, how they attacked certain fronts, and how the run game complemented everything else on the call sheet. When that responsibility gets removed or redistributed, the entire personality of the offense can quietly change. In 2025, the Eagles never fully established that personality. Some weeks the run game tried to be physical, other weeks it looked more situational than dominant. That inconsistency usually points to a lack of unified vision. It's not that players forgot how to block, it's that the offense stopped feeling like it was built around something. When Lane Johnson was missing time and Dickerson and Juergens were fighting through injuries, the margin for error disappeared. Without continuity, even strong designs fall apart. That's why keeping Stoutland as the offensive line coach still matters so much. He's the one voice in the room that guarantees the fundamentals won't slip. Footwork, leverage, hand placement, timing between guards and tackles, all of that still runs through him. So even if the run game philosophy is redesigned by the next offensive coordinator, the execution side remains protected. In simple terms, the Eagles are trying to change the brain of the run game without damaging the muscles. Now think about how this impacts Saquon Barkley moving forward. In 2025, his success didn't come from gimmicks, it came from structure. When the line was right, Barkley was patient, explosive, and decisive. That tells you the Eagles still have the tools to be dangerous on the ground. What they lacked was consistency, and consistency doesn't come from talent alone, it comes from repetition inside a system that everyone understands. If the new offensive coordinator arrives with a clear plan, Stoutland's reduced role could actually help Barkley instead of hurting him. It allows the OC to fully integrate the run game with the passing concepts instead of treating it as a separate department. The best offenses don't say, now we run and now we pass. They disguise intentions, force defenses to hesitate, and punish them for guessing wrong. That's something the Eagles didn't always do well last season. At the same time, there's a danger in overcorrecting. Philadelphia fans know what happens when a team forgets who it is. The Eagles have always been at their best when they impose themselves physically first and creatively second. If the new coordinator focuses too much on structure without respecting that physical DNA, the offense can look modern but lose its edge. That's where Stoutland's presence becomes symbolic as much as technical. He represents toughness, accountability, and trench dominance. So when you hear that his role is reduced, it shouldn't sound like a downgrade. It should sound like a shift in influence. Instead of owning the run game top to bottom, he becomes the guardian of the line while someone else connects the pieces above him. That can work, but only if communication is clean and the philosophy stays aligned. If the OC and Stoutland see football differently, that's when things break. The Eagles are basically betting that they can evolve without erasing what made them strong. They're keeping their best line coach. They're admitting the run game structure failed in 2025. And they're opening the door for a new offensive mind to reshape how everything fits together. That's not rebuilding, that's recalibrating. For fans, this is why the offensive coordinator hire is bigger than any single player move. Whoever steps in will decide how much of the offense runs through physical control versus tactical creativity. And Jeff Stoutland's adjusted role will either support that vision or quietly challenge it depending on how it's handled inside the building. So as the Eagles move toward 2026, the real storyline isn't just who calls the plays, it's who defines the identity. The line still has its teacher. Barkley still has his foundation. Now the Eagles have to decide what kind of offense they truly want to be when the season starts. And now I want your take. Do you want the